Wise man once said, terms are subject to change. And we are learning that the good and hard way. Boy, do we have news for you. Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics, it drops 3 times a week. You can catch us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with new episodes. So be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcast.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock back to 2023. And you had a little bit of a bitter Ryan. This was before Tower Topics. You were still with the park. I was bitter because of the Prestige Pass. So we were both in a bad place in life because you still worked there and I was bitter about the Prestige Pass. And, I swore it off and I infamously backpedaled saying, for a $200 price tag, like that's worth it because that's different. And there's no possible way they could screw this up. There's just no way. How could they screw? Yeah, they figured a way to screw it up. So we had numerous reports and we did confirm that now at least, this is at Cedar Point, at least Top Thrill 2 and Siren's Curse are no longer accepting the single-use fast lane from the Prestige Pass. And this is as of July 1st. So talk about changing the terms halfway through the season.
Yeah, and that was a big selling point, was that one time, single-use fast lane on any attraction in the park that has fast lane plus. So definitely one of those situations where terms and conditions were subject to change, and they decided to change it. And of course, they didn't put anything out there to let people know until you get to the park and guests find out they can't do this anymore.
Yeah, they find out the hard way because they walk up to the ride and all of a sudden, my understanding, and we'll have to explore this a little bit, but what I've heard is that they're saying that it's good for fast lane rides, but not fast lane plus rides. So I'm not sure if those are the only 2 fast lane rides, but Don, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, obviously, pivoting halfway through the season is, on brand for them, but to take away probably 2 of the major reasons why most people bought Prestige passes in the first place, are they ready for this fight?
Well, what it tells me is that, what we thought would happen is that you would have so many guests trying to use that on rides like that and simply, can't accommodate, because now what's supposed to be fast lane plus, get you on the ride quicker, taking you a lot longer to get on those rides, and not, it backs it up. Not a lot of difference between the standby line. So the value of those that paid for, the day use of Fastlane, when they go to the park, they buy Fastlane for that day, or those that bought the all season Fastlane, depending on when they bought it, that could have been around $1,000 or so. So you have those guests that are, not getting good value because all the single use fast lanes, but then you have those that bought only Prestige because they could, use that single use fast lane at Cedar Point on those specific rides. No longer able to do that now. And again, it's not something that's widespread. It's something that you find out when you get to the park that you can't do that anymore. So it's just one of those things that, you throw something out there just trying to, to get the quick buck and get the sale without thinking of the ramifications later on down the line. That's not the first time something like that has happened. It probably won't be the last time something like that has happened. But it is, when you're buying something from Six Flags, any kind of product, it certainly is buyer beware, because they do change the terms and conditions, throughout the year to kind of fit their need. So what you bought maybe in the fall isn't what happens when you arrive at the park on July 1st. So you got to be careful about those kind of things. So, always read the fine print and expect surprises when you invest in a Six Flags product.
Yeah. So they do have a Fastlane and a Fastlane Plus product. And so Fastlane Plus I'm going to name these, and Don, I want you to remember them. These are the ones that kind of come to mind that could be just Fastlane Plus, but Top Thrill 2, Siren's Curse, Steel Vengeance, and Maverick. Those are probably the biggest culprits. Yeah. So none of those are on the list for the regular Fastlane. So we've only heard officially, unless you've heard something else in the last couple of days, Don, but Top Thrill 2 and Siren's Curse. But it's quite possible that Top Thrill 2, Siren's Curse, Maverick, and Steel Vengeance are all off of the single-use Fastlane, which makes it almost worthless, really. I mean, it'd be cool to ride Raptor or something, but boy, talk about diminishing the value of the product that you purchased.
Exactly. And there, again, a number of people that have visited Cedar Point since July 1st have brought this up to us, that this has happened to them. This has been their experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, we might get some people who listen to the show saying, I was there on June 28th, didn't happen to me. Again, since July 1st, there were some rumblings that, they were experiencing this at Kings Island. Some people reached out and said I wasn't able to use my single use on, I think it was Diamondback was one of the rides.
Diamondback, Orion, and Mystic are the ones that I've heard.
Mystic were the ones that came up. But I also, heard that they were having some issues with the scanners.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to happen a lot at Kings Island with the scanners sometimes going down and that. So unless you had the wristband, there was no way for them to really know. So you can understand, if that happened for, a short term, a day or two or something like that there, why that wouldn't happen. But from at least as of this recording, and this is July 8th as we record, it's not impacted anything at Kings Island yet, but definitely at Cedar Point, from several guests that, the terms and conditions, they change there.
Subject to change. Yeah. So I think that I honestly think that Kings Island is safe, at least for this season, simply because we don't have a Fastlane Plus tier. But you better believe that it would be like a Beast, Diamondback, Orion kind of situation where you couldn't use your single-use Fastlane. And honestly, the Beast really has problems with Fastlane capacity. But the thing, though, is what we don't know as of this recording, I've heard that it's Fastlane Plus rides, but only specifically Top Thrill 2 and Siren's Curse. So for all we know, they could just say, hey, it's not good on the Beast anymore. And again, there are a lot of integrity issues. And that's why, when it comes to like the meal plan and stuff, I always wait because, if Kings Island were open till 8:00 or whatever all season, like I'd probably get my money's worth out of the season pass still. But, there's going to be a day when they try to make it so, they've got everyone's money and all of a sudden hot dogs and hamburgers are the only thing on the meal plan. And that's why I'm always careful about it. So they didn't really release the meal plan stuff at all this year. And it wasn't until I went to the park and physically saw, like, okay, it's basically the same as last year, that I went on my phone and bought it right before.
It was like a day before the season began when things were on the website that kind of showed what was on the dining.
But it was vague. It didn't have
very vague. Yeah, very vague with it. I think there is so much. You talk about the Fastlane program, the food and beverage program. All of that needs to really be looked at. I have a piece that I've written. I've not published it yet for Theme Parks by Don about the food and beverage, situation, what Six Flags can do to revamp that, to make it a win for Six Flags, to make it still a win for the guests, to make it a win for the associates. Because let's face it, they sold so many of these dining plans because at the price point they're selling them, and it's a good value for the guests. But there's no way that, with what's on the menu, the size of the kitchens, the size of what they choose to staff, that they can keep up with it. And you have, outrageous lines, the food quality, the portion, all that is so inconsistent because of just, the demand and everything and just the stress that it puts on the associates. So I do have this piece written. I will publish it soon. It will ruffle some feathers, no question about it. Some with Six Flags, some guest, who love the dining plan and, use it several times a week, they're not going to like what I'm suggesting, but you just really, you have to take a look at that if you're Six Flags and, how can we make this better? How can we actually, leverage food and beverage here to even make more money, for them, because that's one of the things that, they have to do in their situation. I mean, they have to make money. That's the only way they're going to, please everybody. It's about making money first, the guest experience second. So they've oversold the dining plan, oversold Bass Lane. That's okay. We'll deal with the guest situation, later. We'll worry about the stress it puts on the associates later. And they got to fix that. And that's one of the things that my piece kind of addresses is just, having traveled around the last 3 years. I've been to a lot of parks, tried a lot of different, places, the different dining options that they have, the different sit down, kind of restaurants, the character experiences at different places, the Disney parks, specifically there, just different things that Six Flags could look at, learn from, Holiday World, Dollywood, Silver Dollar City, Hershey Park, Kennywood. I mean, they all, do it a lot better, more efficiently in the food and beverage department than Six Flags does. Now, Six Flags does have some restaurants throughout the chain where the food is really good. Let's look at Cedar Point. They got a couple of different places. The Pavilion, some good food options there. The Farmhouse, that's one of my favorite places in the entire industry to eat. I mean, the different things they have there, like the steak and different stuff. I'd love to see something like that at Kings Island, like the Farmhouse. So it's not like the food's terrible at all the Six Flags parks, because it's not. They've made steps, taken strides to make it better. Six Flags over Georgia, they've opened a couple of different new restaurants, or different types of restaurants, maybe using the existing buildings, but kind of retheming it, redoing it. They've made strides there. Carowinds, had made some strides, although I've heard they've taken, some steps back. I haven't been there for a couple of years, but I've heard they've taken some steps back. But Cedar Point, Kings Island, there's some things that are really, really good. Some things are flying under the radar that are things that, if guests haven't tried it yet, they should. And I'm talking about like the breakfast that they have at the French Corner. That's some of the best, food that you're going to get in the park. It's on the dining plan, so there's different things they do very well, but they really have to take a look at that. But speaking of food and beverage and terms and conditions subject to change,
I was going to make this transition for you, but go ahead.
Yeah, outside of the gate, someone from food and beverage was out there counting the takeouts during the lunch frame. And on the date, that we're recording here, it was July 8th. So if anyone wants to, look back at when this was happening, but they're tracking that for a reason.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about, when it's said, and it will probably come up that, of all the parks, Kings Island's doing better than some of the others in the chain, in terms of attendance increases and things like that. But let's be realistic. A lot of that is due to the $99 season pass and how close they are, to, how many people living within 20, 30 minutes from the park that bought the $99 pass, bought the dining plan. And the only thing they do is they come in, they grab something to eat, and they leave, whether that's lunch or dinner. That's what they do. So if you get enough of those people doing that, and there are, otherwise they wouldn't have somebody out front keeping track, that's where you're getting your attendance increase versus other parks that are down this year, like a Cedar Point. They're not having a great year there. But when you look at where guests come from, it's not like they can come from 15, 20 minutes away, pop in, get something to eat, and take off. It's not set up the way Kings Island is. So, food and beverage would use this to say people are taking it, they're abusing the dining plan. They're
Well,
not
they say
abusing
they're
the
abusing
dining.
the dining plan regardless, but yes, go on.
Yeah, they're not abusing the dining plan because it does say, specifically says, at least right now, the way the terms and conditions are written,
Subject to change.
you get you get your 2 meals. So
Mhm.
regardless of how you use that within your 4-hour frame, that is up to the guest. So if you get 2 and you come in, you park your car, you walk in, you get something at Grain and Grill, and you head right back out with your food and you head back to work. It's not abusing it because that's what you're entitled to, having a dining plan. Now, can they enforce, something at a, change the, the terms and conditions that you can't leave the park with food? Legally, they can. They can do that. I think that would be a little difficult for them to manage.
Mhm.
I think they would have some altercations, at the front gate if they tried to enforce that. But they're tracking for a reason.
Yes.
And one of the things that I think, in terms of terms and conditions subject to change, that they would look at doing is they would set it up that you got to be in the park a certain amount of time before you can use your dining plan. So that might be an hour. So if you leave work and pop into the park, you might have to wait an hour before your pass is activated to go use your dining plan for the first time. But something's going to change there. Or they're not tracking it for no reason. They're trying to figure out how many people are doing this, and is it something we can control? That's the other piece of it. It's something we can control. Can we stop this abuse from happening? So they'll change something. Either you can't walk out with it, which will be tough to manage, or when you walk in, you can't use that dining plan until you've been inside the park for a certain amount of time. And that's something that would be very easy to do because your barcode would tell any cashier that they haven't been in the park long enough, just like it tells them that, you still have to wait another 48 seconds before you can use this dining plan for the second time.
So a couple different thoughts. If they try to do that, like if you buy your $20 2 slices of La Rosa's pizza, you can't walk out of the park with that either, because they'll have no idea if you had the meal plan or not.
They won't, but that's why it's going to be tough for them to manage that. Very tough for them. But they could set it up to where you had to be if you're going to use the dining plan, you have to be inside the park for a certain amount of time before it's activated.
More likely case, I'd say. But here's the thing, Don.
Yeah, but they're not outside the front gate, tracking how many people are carrying stuff out, unless they've got something in mind what they're going to try to do if the number justifies that.
Yeah, they're thinking about doing a delivery service where they'll deliver the Panda Express to your car. That's a good revenue generator, Don. You never think of the positives. See,
that would be
all those people in the comments are right. No, okay. So here's the thing. You got to be in the park for an hour. I don't think that'll affect change that much. I think that people will. One of two things is going to happen. One, which I think is the most likely case, is people just do it. They'll show up, they'll ride a ride, they'll get the food, and then they'll leave. So all you did was cost them the labor of running a ride.
But what happens if people have to get back to work?
Well, okay, that's the other thing. So the other thing is, well, what if all of a sudden, they have a okay amount of attendance and they just don't next year because they eliminated all those people? Are we going to be back to the point where they have to earn people's visits and actually put in an effort? I mean, the
dining plan has certainly changed how people are visiting the park.
Yeah.
And you're getting guests that otherwise, without that dining plan and that flexibility of it and the cheap price of it and the $99 season pass, would not have a season pass.
I agree. And if you recall, the second year they tried to pull this stunt. This is the other possibility where you get 2 meals, lunches between 11 and 1 and dinners between 4 and 6 or something like that. They did that. They advertised it the second year, which would have been 2015 or so. But before the park ever opened for the season, they backpedaled on it. No, 4 hours apart.
There's no chance of that would work. And that would just make it insane.
Yeah, who's the genius?
The line's already bad.
It got to the point where
bad enough.
Yeah, it got to the point where the policy was out there. Like, I remember this whole thing. Like, it was definitely a thing. But that's when they went from 2 hours between meals to 4.
Yeah, no, there's going to be those that are going to think there's no chance whatsoever they're going to change anything with the dining plan and do something where you have to be in the park a certain amount of time, or say you can't leave with food. again, why are they outside the front gate tracking how many people are doing carry out during the lunch hour?
Mm. Yeah, I agree. So that's kind of an interesting scenario. They've had the attitude for a very long time of pass holders abuse their meal plan by using it twice. I think that internally you've heard that you abuse your drink plan by getting a drink every 15 minutes. So it's interesting to hear how adversarial.
I was told that, last year, after the train came back and the station started raining pretty hard. So I'm under the cover there, right where the the Coca-Cola station is, right by the train, where it's rarely open, but this day it is. So I go in and I get a drink. Maybe 18 minutes later, still raining. I go get another drink, come back, again, and get a third, because it's still, 90 minutes later, it's still raining, and the person looks at me and they're like, "This is your third drink." Yeah, I'm allowed to have 3 drinks. I paid for it, so it's little things like that. But again, nobody is abusing what they bought the pass under those conditions. If it says you get a drink every 15 minutes, if you want to get 4 drinks an hour, you can. You may not get ice with your drink. Pretty good chance of that. But you can get 4 drinks per hour. If you want to be in the park for a little over 4 hours and you want to have 2 meals, you're allowed to have that. That's what your dining plan says you can do. Now, some of the things they've done since the introduction of dining plans is you see more and more restaurants closing. So that person that gets there at 5 o'clock has a difficult time. 4:30, 5 o'clock is a difficult time getting that second dining plan, because they can still point and say, yes, we still have restaurants open. You can still get La Rosa's. You could still get Skyline. You could still get Tom and you can, but because there's only, a select number, or you could go to Chicken Shack. You only get only a few things are open. So the lines are so long that people just give up and don't do it. So they don't get their second meal. So there's ways that they try to curtail that too. So a lot of guests aren't getting that second meal to save on the food costs. They can say that's not happening, but yes, it does.
All right. Well, speaking of big payoffs, Six Flags just completed Q2, as many of us did. And investors will get their first look on how Six Flags is performing when the company reports its second quarter 2026 financial results before the market opens on Thursday, August 6th. Following the earnings release, CEO John Riley and CFO Ash Walia will host an 8 a.m. conference call to discuss the company's quarterly performance, business outlook, and strategy. The webcast will be available live with a replay posted afterward on the company's investor website. It'll probably go well.
Ryan, I don't know about you, but when you listen to those calls, I'm someone that I'm less interested in all the headline numbers that they try to throw out and the different spins and them talking about, because of weather, it was either too hot or rained too much or it was too cold or whatever it might be. Whatever picture they want to paint, to try to make it look like the forecast and the future and everything's bright. I'm less interested in the headline numbers than I am in the commentary that they give up to that point. The Q&A with the analyst, that often reveals for me a lot more about where the company is headed than those prepared remarks. So that's usually what, I find the most interesting, is when those discussions happen, after they've given all those prepared remarks and then open it up for questions.
Yeah. Now, to be clear, we get a lot of people saying like, oh, they're going to paint this rosy picture. Yes, they are. No matter what, that is the CEO's job, is to, look at like companies that are just in terrible shape where they'll like, all we have to do is double our sales and we'll be out of, that's their job. The institutional investors won't fall for it. But the only time that you're going to see anybody say like, look, we're in trouble, is if there's like a real going concern thing. Like there have been times when, they've gone on there and said, we may not make it another quarter. And they're legally required to do that. Six Flags, I don't think, is in a situation like that. But you're going to expect him to be on there and say, guests have reacted so positively to the flexibility of the membership program and this and that. And we are up this much in this month, but it's offset by the fact that attendance is down here. And that's due to weather related, so it's going to be
Yeah, and then they'll talk
something.
about being, that they have a great plan in place. They believe in their plan. You know, and they'll talk. Like you said, the memberships will come in about how well those have been received so far, which is hard to believe because so many people already have season passes. So why would you really buy that right now?
Well,
So there's a
they're not
lot. Yeah, there's a
necessarily
lot.
claiming that people bought them. They're saying they're well received.
Yeah,
So when you say well received, that means people like them. When you say people bought them, that's not the same thing. So they're gonna say
well,
they're well received no matter what.
yeah. But they'll say, we believe in our plan and our strategic, things that we're working on. Everything's working in the way that we thought it would, and we expect this and that, and everything keeps getting kicked down the road further for when all this is really going to happen for them. I still believe that better days are ahead. It's a tough time right now for the company. It's still one of those things where you look at staffing at Kings Island and some of the other parks. It's not because they don't have the employees; it's because they choose not to staff it because they've got to save money.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think that uh, better days are ahead. I think 2027 is still going to be a little rough, but I think once they get to 2028, then I think that everything the roughest time will be over by 2028, and then some better days are going to be ahead for Six Flags.
Well, I think that they've got a pretty big note due in 2030. So that might be, it's going to depend where the interest rates are.
And what else they can sell.
But what they sell does not make a dent on their debt.
No.
That's like somebody in
gonna,
$200,000 in credit card debt selling stuff on eBay. It's like, that's nice, but it's not doing.
No, I do think though that, I really like what I've seen so far from John Riley. I think, given the chance, I think he can right the ship. So, we'll see.
So senior note due 2032. Yields of 5.375% and 5.5%. So they're paying a lot of money in interest. There's two ways to do things. You can either reduce the debt or you can outgrow it. They're not trying to outgrow it right now, but that's what they need to do because they're not going to be able to reduce the debt. Now, is there hope for that? Most certainly. I think there's a huge upside, especially a lot of the legacy Six Flags park that were under leveraged. Chicago comes to mind, Six Flags Over Texas comes to mind, maybe even Fiesta to an extent. But they're going to have to really kind of put a lot into it, and they're going to have to, put an effort into just the growth end of things rather than the cutting end of things, because that's just not.
You're right. They're going to have to find ways to increase attendance by providing more value, and more value isn't making season passes $99.
Exactly.
It's making reasons that you want to come back and spend more money in the park than you do past your season pass, past your dining plan, past your drink plan. There's got to be things that they have to look at, and it's not cutting events, it's not cutting the season short. None of that kind of stuff's going to be the answer for them. And they got to look at and they got to feel good about what they have to offer, in terms of the hardware that they have in the parks. They've got some of the best rides out there,
Right.
so don't be afraid to charge a price for that. Instead of $99 for a pass, make it $130, make it $150, get it closer to what it really should be for what the park has, not just Kings Island, but throughout the company. The portfolio is the word that they like to use. Start looking at that and saying, hey, we got a lot to offer, those that come here for a day of entertainment, and there should be a price for that. Let's not give it away. They got to stop giving it away.
Exactly. All right. When we're back, we will dust off a segment we like to call Buy or Sell.
All right, Ryan, buy or sell. Action Zone at Kings Island will be rethemed to DC Universe by 2028, which is just around the corner.
Yeah, sell. It's too soon. There's no benefit to it, and they'll. I'm not doubting that Action Zone will become DC Universe someday, but it's going to be along with a ride. They're going to have to add a ride, or maybe the rethink it. Yeah, but I think that like they would add a a Batman ride or something like that, and that would be like, we're not just adding a ride, we're adding an area, kind of like Adventure Port and different things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and sell that. I don't think that's going to happen by 2028. What about
I
you?
will sell too. I don't think by 2028, but I think by 2030, if not DC Universe, it certainly has a different kind of theme vibe to that area. I think that'll be the one area of the park that starts to get some love.
Yeah, it needs it. It needs it. All right. Let's move on to the YouTube comment of the day. This is talking about Area Force One. And this is from Shiloh Carter 4135. Says, my bet would be 1, it gets demolished, 2, it sits there and rots, 3, another fun spot park. If it did end up at a Six Flags park, Kings Island isn't on the top of the list. Carowinds makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the previous episode, the different challenges in that with, number 1, acquiring it, number 2, moving it. I think that it will probably sit dormant, for a couple years, and then it'll end up at another fun spot.
Yeah, I think if I had to bet, I would say it's going to end up at another fun spot, that's kind of a cool fate. It's still in the chain and stuff, and it's beloved, and a lot of people go to Orlando, so Orlando and Kissimmee are close. But yeah, thanks for the comment. Let's take this opportunity to thank our Prestige members. I want to give a big shout out to Miss Mandy 1983, Lil Mac 21, Brian Hauser 330T, Aaron Board, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Dakota Cole, Eric Grau, Gibson Hills, Dustin Jackson, Songstress Mikio, Medic 302, Eastern Coaster, Guys and Girls, Justin Y, Mike Garrett, Galaxy B-Boy, Greggy Rocks, Kayla La, T Cleveland, Tim Dwelly, Sun Fun Sarah, Ian Ross, and Carners, Lionel Trains. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and some tiers even get a free t-shirt. So hit that link if you're interested, starting at just $2.99 per month. Whew. All right. We'll be right back with the listener questions. First listener question. Jeff from Wilmington, Ohio said, Don, why do you only like family rides? They're boring and cliche.
I think, first of all, Ryan, anybody that would say that about me certainly hasn't paid much attention or got to know me over the last 45 years. So that's not the case whatsoever. Anyone that says that doesn't know what they're talking about. My favorite rides are all what would be classified as thrill rides. You look at Tower of Terror, that'd be number 1 on my list. I think that's definitely a thrill ride. Stardust Racers, I think that would be number 2. I think that's falls under thrill, doesn't it, Ryan?
Stardust Racers might fall under thrill. So it's got a little bit of a family aspect to it, with the launches and the inversions and the extreme forces, and
What about like number 3 would be the Voyage?
Yeah, the Voyage is not family friendly. The Voyage is like the F word of roller coasters. It's like, it's great, I love it, but it's not really family friendly.
What about rides like Millennium Force, Fury 325, which would be, within my top, 5, 6 right there. I put those under thrill, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so, but I think what he's getting at is, we've often talked about how the Kings Island needs a family ride, and people interpret that as us being like, no, nobody likes RMCs. Everybody hates those. They want a Big Bear Mountain or something. But what we're saying is, for Kings Island's lineup now, that's probably what's appropriate.
That's what they need. Yeah, and we've said that before. If you're paying attention and you listen, we've said if you're looking at it through the Kings Island lens, what they need And remember, I've spent a lot of time there. I've had access to, all those different numbers and what moves the needle and, what has sold the most season passes, what years have been disappointments. And it's been more of the family rides because that's, who Kings Island has been, is now, and because of where they're located, are always going to be for the majority of the guests visiting in the park. Cedar Point, you and I would be talking about a whole different thing. That's definitely geared toward the thrill seekers. It's a destination. People travel from, far away, specifically go to Cedar Point to ride all those thrill machines that they have. So we're looking at it from that lens, not our own personal, I only want family rides there. It's not what we want. It's what's best for Kings Island. Remember, this is a Kings Island show, what best fits them. And again, I'm, fortunate enough that I have the insight of having been on the inside for nearly 2 decades working there, but also being around it for 40 plus years and knowing all the different, marketing PR people that have worked there since 1981 and having those insights, what works, and looking back to those numbers all the way from 1972, I had access to the new attractions and what the increases were. The best year they had for season passes was Mystic Timbers 2017. It's a roller coaster, but it was designed with families in mind. It had a broader appeal because of the height requirement. So those are the kind of things that we're talking about. It's not because, I'm anti-thrill, Ryan's anti-thrill, nothing like that. We're not the anti-thrill channel, but we have to look at things from what's best for Kings Island as a park, what would help them the most when we talk about these different rides. Would we love to see something like, Fury 325, something of that type of a giga coaster? We'd like to see a Tormenta that just opened at Six Flags Over Texas. Absolutely would. But is that what's best for Kings Island? And that's the lens that we talk through.
Yeah. All right. Rachel from Vandalia, Ohio said, "Thank you for your show, Tower Topics. I just watched your episode where Jeremy used many cuss words attacking Don and signed off with Romans 10:10. The irony is likely lost on Jeremy. If you don't look it up, the verse talks about how one's faith, or about showing one's faith with one's mouth. So sorry this a person attacked, and even more sad, he drug faith down. Keep up the interesting show."
Everyone's entitled to their opinion. And sometimes, people like Jeremy have to go on the attack because that's what they need to do to feel better about themselves sometimes, so that's the only way you can look at that, and again, they're entitled to their opinion. And if, they don't like the things that I talk about or Ryan talks about, and they want to, come off strong like they did, my advice to Jeremy would be, maybe we're not the podcast for you. Why do you listen if you don't want to accept what we're having? If it's going to send you off the deep end, it's going to make you, go into a rage and have to, on your keyboard, type that out and actually send it to us. Maybe we're not the podcast for you if it moves you to that level to where you have to do that.
Yeah. Well, and like I said the last time, Kings Island is very special to a lot of people. And a lot of times when people are on the attack or whatever, they're showing their passion, probably not in the healthiest way. But I mean, I get it. Like, I've gotten into it with people, especially on like KIC and on Facebook and stuff. And, Kings Island special to me too. So when we're on here and we say things that aren't always in the best light of Kings Island, or maybe, I think that where he took issue was actually with the whole family ride thing. And it's like, that's not sharing in your vision for a place you're passionate about. Like, I get where the emotions run high, but I don't think this is a referendum on his faith or anything like that. I added that in because I thought that was what came to mind. And if anybody picks up on this reference, leave a comment because you're officially my friend. There's an episode of Malcolm in the Middle where the mom, Lois, gets into a road rage thing and she starts slamming her car into another woman's car. Like it just escalated. It's during Christmas, and the woman had a bumper sticker on her car that said "War is not the answer," and then it shows her bumper smashing into her car. That's what I thought. It was kind of funny, but I don't think that, you know, using that is a referendum on someone's faith or, you know, their personality as a whole or whatever. I think that Kings Island is something people are very passionate about. And yeah, I mean, you've seen it with the Bengals and the Reds too. You know, how many times?
Well, they get upset over, you know, things that are out of their control, number one.
Yeah.
Or they think, you know, fire Terry Francona, fire the front office, and all those kind of things, you know, when the Reds lose. And they have no idea. You know, if it was up to them and they were making the decisions for the Reds, you know, they probably wouldn't win 30 games in a season because they just don't know. You know, that's the thing, that people, they don't know what they don't know, and they think they do, but they just don't. And that's, you know, but the passion's there. You can see the passion. You understand why they get frustrated. You know, and the thing that for me as a baseball fan that, you know, I came to realize a long, long time ago was it's a 162 game season. You know, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're going to win games. You're going to lose games. The best teams, you know, they're going to win 60 games. They're going to lose 60 games. It's what happens in those other 42 games that decides whether or not you make the postseason. You know, so it's just one of those sports that you know, it's a day-to-day thing. You just can't get too high. You can't get too low. And, you know, the thing about baseball, tomorrow's another day. Football, it's week to week, and it gets early fast in football. So, you know, your team gets off to an 0-2 start. You know, there's reason to panic and all that kind of stuff. But back to Kings Island, you know, you're right. You know, people like Jeremy, they're definitely passionate and all of that. But again, you know, understand where we're coming from. And that is through the lens of Kings Island and what's best for Kings Island. And that comes from having the insights that we know what has worked for Kings Island and what hasn't. We're not looking at it from the enthusiast point of view. And they need this ride, they need that ride. You know, would we love to see those rides that they're talking about? Yes. But we also know that, you know, why that might not be the best thing for Kings Island. So exactly. From this, maybe we should start clarifying it, Ryan, and start saying, you know, if it was up to me, I would do this. But, you know, maybe we need to do that. I don't know. But, you know, we certainly appreciate anyone that is that passionate, you know, that they're going to fire off on us and all that.
Well, let me play a hypothetical really quickly, and then we'll wrap this up. But let's say Kings Island does add something a la Big Bear Mountain, kind of like we said. We think that would be the perfect puzzle piece. They add that. A couple years later, we're talking about what coaster they need next. I think the conversation might be quite a bit different because they've got a lot of the family rides kind of covered. Then it's kind of like, well, it would be kind of nice to have one of those new, you know, Vacomas or, you know, a Max Force, if they can get that thing to work. That, you know, I think that would be a different conversation, but it's also kind of like where we stand now. Like that would be for the demographic and for the time period and, you know, for the money that they would be able to put up. I mean, I think that that's the direction they should go, but you know, much like the terms of your Prestige Pass or your meal plan, they're subject to change. You know?
Well, Ryan, you know, there's another guy, I saw in the comments that he or she, whatever, they said that, you know, we were blaming, you know, marketing as to why Orion wasn't a success. We're not blaming marketing. We said it should have been marketed differently, you know, to get more people excited about it at the start. But once the ride opens, you know, it's all about the ride experience. And the fact that in the Golden Ticket Awards, it was in the 40-something range for Best Steel Coaster. I think that kind of supports what Ryan and I are saying, is that, you know, that ride, there's not enough difference really between that and Diamondback at Kings Island. You know, they tried to make it more geared, you know, they kind of trying to tame it down. You know, you're trying to do a Giga, but you want it to be more of the family style Giga, whatever.
Yeah, split the baby.
That's why it didn't work, you know, because it's a great ride, not much different from Diamondback, but in terms of what those that are casting their votes think about it, it's in the 40s. And I think when you spend 30 something $million, you know 5 or 6 years later, you expect a little bit better results than to have a ride that's near the 50th best steel coaster in the industry. And then you've got another ride that opened in 2009 that's ranked way higher in Diamondback. So that's not marketing's fault that it's in the 40s or 50s, but it was just we were talking about how they kind of went rogue. Somebody went rogue in terms of what planning and design had in mind, in terms of what the backstory was going to be, and that kind of took it in a different course and all that, and there was some disconnect, and it just never really. You had COVID too, but it just never really had that engagement that other rides did when it opened, like the Banshee and Mystic Timbers, and and just other rides around the industry. It just wasn't cohesive in terms of how it was being marketed and promoted. So it just, for a lot of reasons, it got off to the wrong start. But once people rode it,
it never got better.
At least the enthusiasts have spoken. It's when they cast their votes, it's not ranked very high.
It's okay. It's solidly okay. And we're talking about a $30 million roller coaster. That's okay.
Yeah, and you could have done a lot more for 30 something million dollars that they put into that, and made something that was spectacular, and something that people wanted to come to Kings Island specifically to ride. That wasn't a ride that had people coming from all over specifically to ride that, like the Beast still continues to this day to do.
Yep. If you've got your own questions, you can email them to us at hosts@towertopics.com. That's HOSTS@towertopics.com. Your first name, the city you're from, as well as your question, your comment, concern. We'd love to hear from you. If you don't want to do that because you're not a boomer, you can send us a text or a voicemail to 513-399-7538. That's 513-399-7538. If you send us a text, we may read it. We'll read it no matter what, but we may read it on the air. If you leave us a voicemail, we may play it on the air. Don, send us home.
All right. Well, he's Ryan. I'm Don. And this has been Tower Topics.